Back tonight here in Focus on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, as we battle the impact of load shedding on a number of provinces and municipalities, but also on economies throughout the country. Stakeholders in Gauteng are pushing for the province to follow the example of Cape Town and work to reduce the impact of load shedding by reducing dependence on Eskom. This came to light as Gauteng MEC for Economic Development, Environment and Agriculture and Rural Development, Pakstow, revealed that the province lost some 122,500 jobs as a result of the power cuts in 2021. This primarily because businesses operated under unpredictable and unstable conditions, among other reasons. Joining us now to quantify the extent of the impact of load shedding on the economic development of Gauteng is the Provincial MEC for Economic Development, Pakstow. MEC, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight on In Focus. I've already mentioned the outcome of load shedding in 2021 on the job creation score. Prognosis for job creation is not looking good. Are we likely to see a higher rate of unemployment in Gauteng come the next labour force survey?
Well, thank you very much, Kabo, and good evening. I should say that we are particularly concerned about the impact of energy, and in particular load shedding, on the economy and our ability to get production to be stabilized, particularly in the industrial and commercial sectors of our economy. And it has had a huge and devastating impact on jobs and economic development in the province, and that's why we've made a conscious and deliberate decision as the provincial government to initiate programs that look at alternatives. Some of these are short-term programs. We have just issued in the past few months an RFI, which is an advertisement to solicit potential partners in introducing and implementing microgrids in the province, taking advantage of the 100 megawatt cap that was announced by the president that would not require the licensing regime that is long and arduous for the private sector. So we're taking advantage of that and have solicited partners so that we're able to generate electricity and energy to support industry. We have also, in fact, we are currently finalizing adjudication through the China Automotive Special Economic Zone on a gas supply program to support the automotive special economic zone in Swami. And this is at the back of one, load shedding, but also challenges with regards to electricity supply in the area. And we've kind of made a decision that says, very short term, let's look at gas. Going forward, let's look at introducing microgrids. We've entered into a discussion with the IDC and the DBSA, which are state-owned development financing institutions, to work on a financing model for these initiatives. And of course, they have been quite responsive to our discussions on how we can finance this and smooth in the financing of what is likely to be a huge capital outlay up front, but we can smooth it through a sustainable financing model.
All right. I see how you're supporting the automotive sector, but I want to, which we already know, I mean, just the cost of buying a generator for a small business in a township is completely out of reach. Never mind an inverter or a solar grid to come onto the business. How are you supporting those small businesses? What's the plan for them? I understand the microgrid. It's a long-term plan that needs the IDC to come up with a financial model. These are people who in the next 12 months, if not 6 months, could possibly be closing down.
As you would know, we've just passed the Township Economic Development Act. We're developing specific programs, and energy supply is one of the programs that we are implementing at the back of the Township Economic Development Act. And the financing models that we're talking about extend, and I should admit initially, because we're an economic development department, we focused on industry and enterprises that are facing large-scale setbacks with regards to production, and that's what our starting point was. But it's become quite evident that the model could also be applicable to township-based enterprises. And the financing models we're talking about essentially saying, if you think about it this way, if you are to install a solar system in a small enterprise in the township, it requires fairly significant initial capital outlay, but it would reduce your demand on the Eskom grid and therefore how much you're paying into the grid. Now, if we create a financing model that says, instead of paying this money over to the utility, so to say, or at least part of it, you would pay it over time to a supplier of energy, or essentially a financing mechanism that would have installed the solar system up front. Yes. So when we're talking about financing models, we're talking both at large scale, but also trying to reduce it to community-based interventions, particularly in the townships. And we're very cognizant of areas such as Soweto, for example, where there have been townships that have not had energy for months on end. And in designing these solutions, we've also said, let's work with our colleagues in the Gauteng Energy Office to extend these facilities that we're working on into the domestic market.
Yeah. So, I mean, you maintain, of course, that the key focus over and above these alternatives is to mobilize towards a reduction in demand, particularly looking at industry, but of course, these could be extended to residents as well. Why are you not suggesting to your fellows in government, for example, for Eskom to at least give residents an incentive of some nature for them to put up their own solar system, at least reduce the reliance on the grid?
Well, as I said, Thabo, we are looking ourselves at some of these solutions. We know that Eskom, in particular in rural areas, have found solutions to have microgrids in some of our rural areas that have had challenges with regards to access to the grid. So Eskom already has a model. We're looking very closely at the Eskom model to say, can we have domestic-based microgrids in some of our townships and in some of our residential areas? So we are looking at it quite closely. And as I said, we've just recently decided to extend the scope beyond the industrial interventions that we're making. I should say that as the provincial government, we're working very well with Eskom in relation to energy going forward. We are part of a team. We've worked with Sasol and mitochondria that have committed to invest in green hydrogen in the province of Gauteng to support our industrial base load. Eskom is a partner in these conversations about how we solve these issues going forward and how to introduce green energy. Because in reality, and I always emphasize, we are the Economic Development Department, so we're looking at risks going forward. And one of the major risks that we're confronting is the advent of tariffs on products that are generated through dirty fuels from 2030 going forward. And this would impact about 60% of our exports as a country and as a province. So we're already looking at, yes, let's resolve the immediate problems, but let's also think 8 years from now. And in 8 years from now, our industry would be impacted negatively if we don't make the transition. And that's why we're actively engaging with Sasol. They've made a commitment to start investing in green hydrogen from next year going forward. Yeah. Mitochondria have also said in our special economic zone in the Val that they will be investing and starting their plant next year. And we continue to mobilize other potential partners to come on board into the future. So we're looking at immediate solutions, but we're also looking at long-term solutions that are cognizant of the need to maintain our industrial base as the province of Gauteng.
Speaking of future projects, I mean, we spoke to Orania moments ago. They already have a 441 kilowatt solar plant that is going there, providing for that small town. It's of course small fish compared to what you'd need to deal with. You've issued an RFI already. Have you identified a site? How much it will cost? What kind of power would be able to be generated from that site?
We are looking at working on the below 100 megawatts requirement. We're looking at two sites in particular. Of course, we prioritize in the Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone. It is a flagship program. We anticipate that almost 200,000 new Ford Rangers will be produced from there, and looking at the future investments into the Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone. So that's one of the areas. The other is an area where the private sector has expressed interest in investing. We've got investors that have come on board and said on the N12 corridor, which would constitute the programs we implement in the West Rand between Soweto and the West Rand along the N12, there are investors that have expressed appetite and willingness. They bought the land. They simply just want to develop. And we've been working with them, but energy reliability has been a problem. So we're looking at that as the second site we would be implementing. But we're not limiting our interventions to that. We're saying, let's start with this, but the intention is over the next 2 years that we should be able to produce 1,000 megawatts in the province of Gauteng. I should say that alternative energy has been a program that many institutions, government and the private sector, has been looking at throughout the country. I can say that, for example, we had a microgrid when I was in the city of Joburg, in the area of Tembelihle, where we introduced a microgrid to resolve what was seemingly an untenable problem. And that worked quite well. We introduced demand-side measures, particularly load limiting, taking advantage of smart meters as an intervention. Because as you say, whilst we're looking at solutions on the supply side, we also need to look at solutions on the demand side. How do we reduce demand on the grid and therefore ease the burden that Eskom is carrying? Whatever the challenges are, we have a collective responsibility to ensure that we can maintain reliability of energy supply, ease the burden, and ensure that we grow our economies.
Yeah. Are you speaking to your colleagues as well at COCTA, particularly around that? I know you're saying your prime portfolio, of course, being the economy, you're looking at industry and you're looking at enterprises, but the local government sphere, of course, is a COCTA kind of responsibility. Are they engaged in that? Are we beginning to see municipalities moving towards taking advantage of this 100 megawatts license exemption?
The Gauteng Energy Office has been established in COCTA in the province of Gauteng, and we're working very closely with them. As I said, we started scoping in industry, and working with COCTA, we're now looking at expanding the solutions into the residential sector. So we're working with COCTA. We're also working with SALGA as the Association of Local Government in the solutions that we're working on. So certainly local government is an integral part of the solutions we're looking at.
Yeah. And in terms of the broader industry call, for example, a business unity South Africa saying the 100 megawatts was a start as far as the regime is concerned. It's now time, because of the crisis that we're in, to look at, in fact, removing all limitations and just really allow industry to come on and assist with the energy generation question. Where do you sit on that?
Well, I should say that I subscribe to having a just transition. We must have transition into alternative energy sources, but we also have to accept that we have industries and jobs that are reliant. The country, essentially the coal industry in the country is currently supporting about 500,000 jobs. So as you transition, you need to transition with those jobs into alternative energy sources, but we need to make the transition. When we're talking about an energy mix, it should include everything. So from our point of view, we should look at all solutions that are there, but take into account the just transition and not just do it to solve one problem by creating another problem. Let's try and do it in a manner that's sustainable.
MEC, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That's the MEC for Economic Development, Environment, Agriculture and Rural Development, Parks Dawu there.